Hey folks, I'm Allison. Welcome to my booktube channel. Okay, y'all, we're starting on a bit of a tough note. I had this book, The Lost Bookshelf by Evie Woods, on my TBR going into January. And I've read, let's see, how far have I read? I've read 65 pages, and it is about 400 and change pages long. So I usually try to get about a third of a way through a book before I DNF it, and I am gonna do my best to get through, the first 150 pages of this book before I make a final call. And maybe it will get much better than it has been. I mean, it's so beautiful, and the premise of the book being about, these characters finding a vanishing bookshop and the power of reading it's so tempting to me. But something about the book so far has been a little boring. Just something about the way that the action is unfolding, and the fact that maybe because the action is being told in several different timelines, I feel like it's kind of a slog because I'm having to have that feeling of like jumping into a new unknown story over and over and over again. And so maybe as I get further into the book, it won't feel like such a slog anymore. I'll be familiar with all of the various timelines and actually be able to sort of get into the action. But the first book on my TBR is finishing, or at least getting further through, The Lost Bookshelf by Evie Woods. Oh, and one other note, this is a book that came to me through my little free library. And actually a book that I got from someone who was giving away books on the Facebook Marketplace, and I reached out and said, hey, I have a little free library. I'd love to take some books, off your hands to put in the library. And so they gave me this book. I'm reading it. And by the end of April, I will either have finished it or have DNF'd it. And so it will be going into the library. The next book on my list is Bossypants by Tina Fey. This is a book that I have wanted to read for a really long time. And I listened to some of the audiobook at one point and for whatever reason, I didn't get that far through it. And so it's been on my list for a long time. And I got this book out of a little free library in my neighborhood. I made a video, and I'll link it here, going around and shopping in various little free libraries in my neighborhood. And this was one of the books that I brought home in that, book haul. And I'm really, really excited. I'm starting off March with this book. I just think Tina Fey is so wonderful and so funny. And I'm not usually that big into memoirs, but I think comedy memoirs, for whatever reason, are more fun for me. I really liked Amy Poehler's memoir. And, Tina Fey is in Amy Poehler's memoir a fair amount. And so I'll be very curious to find out if Amy Poehler is also in Tina Fey's memoir. But all the reviews I ever read for this book said that it's really phenomenal. And everybody that I've ever talked to about it that's read it has had really good things to say. And I think I'm in the mood for something like this. I read a lot of fantasy in January and February, and the world feels kind of heavy right now. And so I think a comedy memoir of somebody who I happen to know made it, I think is just the ticket. The next book on my TBR is The Unlikely Adventures of the Shergill Sisters by Balli, Kaur, Jaswal. This is the author of Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows, and I never read that book, but I saw it in the bookstore in Barnes & Noble when I was browsing probably 10 different times, and picked it up and carried it around and ultimately put it back. And for whatever reason, it just never really spoke to me, but I really always had it in the back of my mind as something that I would like to get to reading eventually. And so I found this book in a charity book sale. I got it for $5, and it's by the same author, so I think this will be a fun way to get a little exposure to her work and see if maybe I actually do want to go out and try to track down Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows at some point. But the plot of this book also just seemed a little bit more like the kind of thing that I would be interested in. It's about two sisters who are of Indian heritage. Their mother is Indian, they're British, they live in the UK. And on her deathbed, their mother asks them to make a pilgrimage together to the Golden Temple in Amritsar to carry out her final rites. And the two sisters are very different humans, and their relationship has been getting strained as they have gotten older. They've grown apart. And so it's about the two of them presumably reconnecting on this journey back to carry out their mother's final wish. And that seems really nice. I think it seems like a kind of hopeful book, and based on the reviews of her other work that I was familiar with, I think she's supposed to be a pretty good writer, so I'm really looking forward to jumping into this one as well. The next book on my TBR is Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I read The Night Circus a while ago, and I liked it okay. I really liked the aesthetic of it. The plot wasn't everything that I had hoped it would be, but I got through it. I enjoyed it. I have a generally positive memory of it. And this book is really beautiful, and I've seen people talking a lot about how much they like it on the internet for years. And this one actually was also given to me by the same woman who gave me the Lost Bookshelf for my little free library. So I wanted to, get to it quickly, give it a good shot, and then, unless it really, really speaks to me, pass it back along into the world. Oh, one other quick note. I've said this before in other videos, but the woman that I connected with in the Facebook no-buy group for my neighborhood. And Facebook no-buy groups are an amazing way to get free books. I'm always surprised by how many people are trying to give away free books in their Facebook no-buy groups. And if you are trying to disconnect from the metaverse, as it were, which I am. I actually have deleted all my metas now. The no-buy project has its own app, so you can participate in your local no-buy group even if you don't have Facebook. Anyways, on to the book itself. It is, I imagine, going to be very aesthetic and very beautiful and sort of ethereal in the way that Night Circus was. And so I'm excited for that. I think that will be a fun reading experience. I'm not totally sure what the book is about based on reading the back. The summary is a little bit word cloud of vibes, but basically it's about a guy named Zachary who finds a mysterious book in the stacks of his campus library, and somehow that takes him on an adventure. And that's a great premise for a book. I'm into books about finding a magic book and it taking you on an adventure. I think that's a tried and true kind of tropey plot, and I'm into it. The last book that I'm putting on my TBR, as in the last book that I'm setting myself the goal of to read, is Bloom by Delihlah S. Dawson. And this is a short book. I think it's like a lesbian romance horror book. And I read in January When We Lost Our Heads by Heather O'Neill, which I would describe as like hot girl horror and is also very queer. And I really liked it. It was a lot of fun. And this book seems like, I think this book is going to be more horror-y than that book. And so I don't know if I will love it. I don't traditionally read a ton of like really serious horror, but it's also, it's short. If I don't like it, it won't take me that long to get through it. And it's good to try new things. So there you have it. Those are the 5 books on my TBR list going into March and April 2025. I probably will read more than these 5 books. In the last 2 months, I read all the books that were on my TBR and a couple of extras, but I think it's good to leave yourself a little flexibility in terms of being able to accept into your life a new spontaneous book that you weren't, thinking that you would read. And so I try not to set myself overly ambitious goals because I don't want reading to feel like something that I have to do. I want it to feel like something that I want to do and love to do. And so keeping my goals relatively obtainable is a way that I make sure that I sort of police that boundary. Anyways, I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you'd like to hear more from me, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you so much for spending some of your one wild and precious life with me watching this video. Goodbye.